Welcome to Haunting Live Podcast, a place where we bring a new paranormal guest each episode to share their journey and experiences. For more Haunting Live real experiences, be sure to follow us on our social on Instagram, Facebook, and also Blue Sky. And don't forget to also check us out on our official website, hauntinglivepodcast.com. And welcome to this episode of Haunting Live Podcast. We have an amazing guest with us joining us on this episode, and he is an author. He has many books published, and we're going to talk a little bit about those books that he's made, and especially the most recent ones that he's done, with some interesting ghost hunting tales to talk about. And please welcome Brian Paone to the show. Hi, Brian. How are you?
Very good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for coming on to Haunting Live and sharing some of your interesting ghost hunting experiences you've had. I've been talking to you a little bit just now about some of them, and I can't wait to get into some of the topics that you have. It sounds really interesting. So, but first of all, can you kind of introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background before we start?
Absolutely. So, born and raised in Salem, Massachusetts. I lived in Salem from the day I was born until I was 30. Not only was I born and raised in Salem, but I spent the ages of 8 to 16 living in a funeral home in the area, and that always kind of bugs people out when I tell them that. And now I live. When I was 30, I did leave Salem. I lived in a couple places around the world. I lived in Japan for 4 years. I lived in other places around America. And in 2020, at the height of COVID, I moved to Northern Virginia. I'm so close to the DC line that if I threw a baseball hard enough, I could probably hit, something in Washington, DC. So that's where I am now. And when I was a kid, I was really big into an author called Christopher Pike. He is kind of like young adult horror. And I just thought he was fantastic. And then my entire world changed. In 1989, Christmas morning, under the tree, wrapped, was a hardcover book from my stepmother. And I opened the book, and I was gifted my first Stephen King novel. And I read my very first Stephen King novel, which was The Dark Half. And that was the moment where I said, I want to do this as a career. Like, this is what I want to do. I want to figure out how I want to, like, Christopher Pike had already kind of sucked me into like the speculative fiction side of things, the horror, fantasy, sci-fi. But reading that first Stephen King novel where he amps everything up, he's like, everything kind of gets brought up a little bit more, a notch. I was like, yep. And there it is. And that was I was in 7th grade, right? 1989, 7th grade. Yep, that tracks. And, I started writing horror short stories in 7th grade, and I was writing them like every weekend. And then what I was doing was I was bringing them into school, and I was passing it out to like my classmates to read. And then it got to the point where when I came in on Monday morning, I had like 4 or 5 classmates go, "Hey, did you write a new story over the weekend? Did you bring it? Do you have it with you?" And I was like, I think I have fans. Now, granted, it's not real fans, right? But there was a sense where I said, this, like, people want to read what I'm writing, and yeah, they're my the kid who sits next to me in class, but still there was this, Brian does this, and we look forward to his new short story. And I never stopped writing. I went to college, I minored in creative writing and American Lit. I just never stopped writing. Like, that is what fuels me, what pushes me forward. My first novel was published in 2007. So I've been published now for 18 years. So I have 14 books in 18 years. Oprah Winfrey gave me a shout out in her book club. And I was nominated for a Hugo Award in 2016 for my time travel novel, I Lost to the Martian. They turned that book into a movie with Matt Damon, if anybody remembers that. That's the book I lost to. And one of the jokes that I have is that, well, I'm really glad that I lost that award because Matt Damon would have played a terrible lead in my book. So that's kind of my thing with the Hugo Award loss. But it's just amazing to be at least recognized and to be there, and because I had to fly out for that, and but I write all over the board, and I think that's because Stephen King became my favorite author. He writes all over the board, and you could be like, no, he really doesn't, Brian. You know, he's a horror author, and I'll be like, really? Okay, so we go Shawshank Redemption to Stand By Me to The Running Man, right? So you're gonna tell me he's a horror like that? You're gonna tell me that's all he does, right? So I adapted kind of that mythology of writing, not pigeonholing yourself into one thing. So another author friend of mine, Marissa, she came up with a joke and said, "You don't stay in your lane." And I've adapted that as my official tagline as an author. So anything you see now that has me on it, it says Brian Paone, an author who doesn't stay in his lane. And I've kind of just like owned that, where I will write anything. So I mentioned I have 14 published novels, and I have everything from horror, sci-fi, fantasy, but I have a historical war novel. I have an urban crime thriller. I have a collection of short stories that range from a Western to a coming of age story. It's to a mermaid story. I mean, I just don't, I wanted to be like Stephen King, where you get to play in the genres. You get to kind of go back and forth, and that was very important to me as an author. And I had already, I'm sure this was a question coming up, but 2 years ago, I was in Missouri for training for my because I do have a 9 to 5 job. So I have a 9 to 5 job, but being an author is also part of my career. And I was out in Missouri for training, and we were bored on a weekend. And one of the guys I was out there training with said, "Hey, the Missouri State Penitentiary has overnight ghost hunts." And I was like, "I've never been on a ghost hunt before." Like, sure, I'm from Salem, Massachusetts, but I've never been on a ghost hunt before. And their ghost hunts is they give you like ghost hunting gear. Like you can sign it out. So so you go and you get handed things that you see in the movies. And I was like, this is real. I was like, oh my God, right? This is amazing. Um, and I did the Missouri State Penitentiary overnight ghost hunt. I loved it so much that I said, there's a book here. I didn't know what it was, right? There was no plot line yet, but I said, there's a novel here where a bunch of strangers buy a ticket to come to, a widely known haunted area, and then everything goes wrong, right? And that whole thought started down this journey I'm on now, where now I am staying inside haunted locations to write. Like that was the pinnacle. It started that whole where we are now, like where my career took a turn.
Right, that's what you do now, but I want to touch a little bit before we continue on into your experiences staying overnight to write these books in these locations.
Yeah,
Your childhood home. Did you have any experiences there in that funeral home that even came close to ghost hunting in these locations that you were at?
I did. There is one specific story that I love to tell because I had a multitude of small, subtle ghost experiences living in the funeral home, but there is one very concrete one that this is the story that I feel like just owns all of the stories. Um, One of the other stories, really quickly, was we'd be woken up at like 2 a.m. with the TV turned on and the volume all the way up. Now, you gotta remember my age. This was during a time when you had to pull a knob on the TV, and the volume was that knob, and you had to turn it down or up. There was no remote control, there was no signals getting lost, there was no buttons. Something used to physically pull out the knob and turn the volume all the way up so loud that it would wake us up, where we'd have to go down and push the knob back in to turn it off. But that's not the story I want to tell. I just want to say that we had things like that happen all the time. The story that I love to tell was I was wrapping Christmas presents for my parents, my mom and my stepdad. They wanted to go out and buy a Christmas tree at a Christmas tree farm that night. They asked me if I wanted to go. I said, nope, I want to stay back because this will give me an opportunity to wrap Christmas presents. I took a piece of paper and with a Sharpie, I wrote, please knock first, wrapping gifts. And I taped it to the outside of my bedroom door and I closed the door. And basically, I put that up so if they came home and I didn't hear them, they wouldn't just open the door and walk into my bedroom and they would see the gifts that I had bought them. I was wrapping their gifts, right? So I put my music on, I think this was like 93, 90, yeah, 93, 94, right? So I think that's probably blasting like White Zombie or Nine Inch Nails or something. And, the music's playing and on my door was a very concrete knuckle to wood knock. Not a scary, spooky horror movie knock. It wasn't like a thunk, thunk, right? Because that's so cliche. No, this was a person who had read the note and needed to talk to me. So it was it was the same like pace that you would do if you had read that note, right? It was like a dun 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 dun, right? Like bum bum bum, Brian. And I was like, hold on, hold on. I hit pause on my music. I grabbed all the gifts I hadn't wrapped yet. I shoved them under I remember this so vividly. I shoved them under my bed. I opened the door and the house is completely dark and completely silent. There's nobody in the house. My parents had not come home yet. But that was a knock, 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 Brian. So I decided that I was freaked out enough. I'm not going back in my room. I went down to the staircase. Now, our staircase in the funeral home was, it was like, there was a couple steps, a landing where you had to turn to your right, and then you would go down like 10 steps, and then there was a landing, and then you turn to your right again and go down like another 3. Like that, it was, kind of made a backward C. I decided to sit on the landing at the top, so I had my feet kind of on the step below me and waited for my parents to come home. I just sat there. I waited. I was like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying right here because from that view, I could see below me and I could see above me because I wanted to know if something was coming out of the shadows. I didn't want to be surprised, right? So my parents come home. My stepdad's the first one in. They bought a tree. It's on the top of the truck. Stepdad comes in. His name is John. John looks at me. He looks up the staircase at me, right? So he's looking up. I'm looking down. And he's like, what's up? You okay? And I start telling him the story. As I'm telling him the story, I see his face change and he takes a full step backwards. And I go, what? He goes, somebody just walked by behind you. Yeah. And that was it. I was done. It was like, that's it. I'm check please. Yeah. He watched an apparition or whatever as I'm telling the story, just walk down the hallway right behind me as I'm talking about somebody knocking on my door because I left that sign.
Sounds like they almost waited till somebody else was there for them to show themselves, right?
Yeah, yeah, it was. It was definitely yeah, it was an interesting night. That is the most concrete um, concrete story I have about the funeral, about living, there. So
And it proves that you can get full bodied apparitions in a funeral home too, then.
yeah, yeah. So the only full body apparition I've ever seen in my life was at the Ditto House while I was writing my book, which is called Unpacking the Ditto House. And that's the only time in my entire life that I've come face to face with a full body apparition. But that house, so it's an inn, right? It's like a bed and breakfast type place. It's considered Kentucky's most haunted inn. You can Google that. Like if you type in the words Kentucky's most haunted inn into Google, the Ditto House pops first. And the activity in there is crazy. And I saw my first full body apparition. The joke is she stood up from the bed. I screamed. She screamed. It was like the scene in E.T. and Elliot when they meet in the cornfield and E.T. and Elliot scream, bah, bah, and they both run. I mean, that's basically what happened. Yeah. And that was so.
Well, let's start there then. If you want to, we can get into your experiences at the Ditto House and
Yeah.
how you kind of got to get to that location, what brought you there. And also, you mentioned to me that there is some Sasquatch sightings around there I am interested in hearing about as well. So
Yeah, yeah,
let's start with that.
sure. Okay. So I had already spent 8 weeks writing inside the Missouri State Penitentiary for my novel, These Walls Still Talk. Every word of that novel was written inside Missouri State Penitentiary, which the abbreviation is MSP. So it's easier for me to just say that from this point on. So at MSP, that's one of America's most haunted prisons. They allowed me to stay there for 8 weeks to write that book. I didn't ever think I would do that again. I did not think that I would ever write another book inside of a haunted location. I was the guest of honor at a supernatural soiree in New Jersey because I wrote that book. So because I stayed at MSP for 8 weeks and wrote this Ghost Hunt Gone Wrong novel, they asked me to be the guest of honor. At this soiree was Nesper. Those are the people who are in charge of Ed and Lorraine Warren's museum, right? So Wade Kirby was at the soiree. Wade is the person who's actually in charge of Annabelle, the real Annabelle. And me and him have become very, very, very close. Me and Wade are one of my favorite people in the whole world. I love him to death. We meet up anytime we can. I've gotten very close with the Nesper people because of this.
That's a great
So,
person to be friends with.
yeah, no, Wade, I'm telling you right now, Wade is hands down one of the nicest human beings on the planet. But point being is Wade approached me at the soiree and said, "Hey, Brian, would you ever think about doing a sequel to These Walls Still Talk, to the MSP book?" And I said, "Well, no, it's the one and done. I'm not going to do a sequel. I can't imagine doing a sequel. I don't know how that would even work. What am I going to do? Like go back to MSP and stay there for another 8 weeks and write like part two? Like it's like this is amazing anyway." He's like, "Well, how about not a sequel? How about just another book that is, that where you stay in another haunted location and come up with a completely different plot, different set of characters. Like, what if you just do that again?" And I was like, "Okay, I'm listening." Right? He goes, "Well, I want to introduce you to somebody." And Wade, he's the curator of Annabelle. Wade brought me over to Ernie and Denise Pack, who were sitting at a table, and they own the Ditto House. And he introduced me to them. And me, Ernie, and Denise started talking, and they really loved the idea that I stayed at MSP for 8 weeks. And they said, "Well, we will we will give you a room at the Ditto House for 3 weeks if you think if you can come and do that." And I was like, "Okay, I guess." I walked into that supernatural soiree in New Jersey never thinking I was going to leave with an opportunity to go do this again.
Are you looking for that hard to find item, spiritual item that your loved one wants to always get, but you don't know right where to check out? Why not check us out here underneath hauntedlivepodcast.com. Underneath our store, though, we actually have tons of items from dream catchers, crystals, so many more for you. Check us out underneath hauntedlivepodcast.com.
The caveat is that not only do they live in Kentucky's most haunted inn, but the woods surrounding their house is considered one of the highest Sasquatch activity sightings on the East Coast. So we're not taking anything away from Washington State. I know there's a ton there in Oregon. Like we're not claiming, they don't claim that that they have the highest in the country. But if you look at the East Coast, like if you take a pencil and you draw a line down America, right? And we just kind of take a chunk out of the East Coast. There, Fort Duffield Woods is highly active, to the point where people come from all over the world to squatch at Fort Duffield. So I was like, holy crap, that's something I never in a million years ever considered putting into one of my books, like Sasquatch, right? So Greg Yost, that's his real name, but he goes by Squatch Man. He lives in Indiana. Indiana, where he lives in Indiana, to where the Ditto House is in Kentucky, it's like an hour drive, maybe. It's not too far. So Squatch Man came down 4 times while I was there. Yeah, 4 times while I was there working on the book, and took me squatching in the woods. I I was like a little kid every time. I could not believe that, the joke is that Squatch Man is the Squatch Whisperer. Like, he has the ability to draw them out, to like get them to like step out from around the tree, to like show themselves a little bit, to be calm, to be safe. Like, he gives them a safe environment to come out, right? Because it's not about us being safe, it's about them feeling safe. And so it like blew my mind. And when I was there, I was like, well, this clearly needs to be a haunted house slash Sasquatch novel. Like, I can't not have Sasquatch be a major part of this book. As an author, my biggest challenge was figuring out how to make those two worlds collide without feeling forced, shoehorned, or contrived or anything like that. Like, how do I get Sasquatch in a haunted house novel? And that was basically what I had to work with. Like, how I knew that I needed Sasquatch in this book. One, because it would separate the book from These Walls Still Talk. These Walls Still Talk is 100% a ghost novel. 100% a ghost novel. There's nothing else in that book other than angry spirits, right? I didn't want to write the same book again. I didn't want another book where it was 100% angry spirits, because all I'm doing is recycling a storyline, right? I'm not adding anything. But to bring Sasquatch into the fold was the challenge, but also makes this book unique. It makes it not the same book. It makes it so I'm not doing the same old. And I wrote, and I split my time. I wrote, a lot of the book inside the house alone. And I wrote some of the book out in Fort Duffield on a bench in the woods alone. And I kind of went back and forth. So the book, even me writing, I was putting myself and I was surrounding myself in the two different like juxtapositions, right? Because we have juxtapositions here. We have a haunted house, and then we have Sasquatches in the woods, and I'm trying to put them in the same book.
Was it fairly easy for you to mesh those two together, or did you find it tricky to put Sasquatch, which has different views of topics of what they are, to like the paranormal side?
I found it very difficult in the beginning. Very, very difficult in the beginning. Where I sat down with Ernie and Denise, the owners of the house, and I sat down with Squatch Man, and I sat down with some other people, and I had some phone calls with some Bigfoot experts, and I said, how can I make this work? Like, how can we make this work? And once I figured out that really spirits and Sasquatch can both be looked at as supernatural creatures, right? Once that playing field got evened for me, it became easy. So it was incredibly difficult in the beginning, but as I learned more about Sasquatch, as I went down the rabbit hole, as I talked to experts, as I educated myself, and I didn't want Bigfoot to be like the scary ape in the woods, because the more I learned about them, the less that's what they are. And I found that I found myself being very like sympathetic towards them, and it was important to not portray them as monsters, right? The snarling, growling thing, because they're not. And then my experiences that I had with Squatch Man, the few times that I went squatching with them, when I did have interactions with the Sasquatch, there was nothing but like calmness and like peacefulness. And so that's what they're represented in the book. So if anybody buys my book thinking they're getting a snarling, clawing monster in the woods, they're going to be highly disappointed, because in my book, the Bigfoot become the voice of reason. They become the calmness of the storm of the Ditto House. And I don't know how many books out there portray fiction books, right? I don't know how many novels boast that they have a Sasquatch in it, and they're not that snarling ape-like creature. And I chose not to do that. They become the protectors, the watchers of the Ditto House. Almost like they're, in my book, they became almost like the landlord, right? Almost like we're going to take care of the property. We're going to make sure everybody stays safe. And that's a kind of a cool spin too. So I'm hoping people buy this book and, see the Sasquatch kind of differently. And I only used what I felt about them in the book. I did not want them. And I realized that they weren't the snarling ape-like creatures that I thought they were when I went there. And then I have these experiences. I said, no, these are peaceful. These are very these creatures need to be protected and loved. And so that's who they are in my book. They become the voice of reason within the chaos of the ghosts of the Ditto House.
Yeah, that's great that you actually found that yourself and was able to kind of put that into your book as well, the way that you feel or that you found it to be when you were there yourself. So, with that though, can you kind of explain some experiences you had while you were staying at the house?
Yeah, so I already told you about the full body apparition where we screamed, I screamed, she screamed, we all screamed for ice cream. But another thing, so yeah, I'll talk about my Sasquatch experience. I went up to this wood line at Fort Duffield, and everybody was kind of down at a fire pit and I stood there and I was all alone, and I started to see things in the wood line, like movement, and one became two, two became three, three became six, six became 12, and I was like, what's going on, right? And I started to see eyes, and I started to see things move, and then I started to see them. And I made a phone call to one of the guys down the campfire, but I didn't want to talk loud because I didn't want to spook anything, right? And I'm whispering. I was like, you have to come up here. And he's like, where are you? I was like, and so I put my phone over my head and I went like this. I waved it so he could see my light. He's like, just get up here. And so he came. This is someone who was out there like squatching with us that night. It's Trevor. His name is Trevor. And Trevor came up and he stood next to me and he started to see it too. And we put away our phones in our pockets. And we were told by Squatch Man that they don't like recording devices being out. Like they understand what weapons are. They understand what recording devices are. So they know when somebody is there to exploit them or harm them or whatever. Right. So I put my phone in my back pocket. Trevor put his phone in his back pocket. And I think one of us, I can't remember who it was, it may have been Trevor, said out loud, our phones are away. We're not here to harm you. We just want to see you. Out of the wood line bounded what we think was a cub, a little one. It came about, 10 yards, stopped, and then ran back into the wood line. And I could not believe what I had just seen, because it was not anything I thought it would look like. It was almost like trying to focus on something that's watery, but still there. It's not like looking at a monkey. It was not like looking at a creature. It was like looking at something out of your peripheral vision that didn't quite want to be seen, but was still curious. And that did it for me. And we both saw it. We were both describing it as we were seeing it. So I knew we weren't making this up. Like he was saying things that I was seeing, and I was saying things that he was seeing, and we were like actively talking about it. And it was crazy. Yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. So, I'm having the book release party back there at Fort Duffield. So, and we still have some tickets available. So if any of your listeners want to take a trip to Kentucky to Fort Duffield, It is the weekend of May 14th, Saturday night. We will be there with Squatch Man, and he is doing a 6-hour squatching session. And it was absolutely something like I've never experienced before. That was something.
Wow, definitely. Sounds like maybe it might have been even cloaked a little bit, like hiding on
So
you,
it was
but
close.
not fully
Yeah,
visible yet, right?
it was. I didn't know that they cloaked until Squatch Man explained that to us. They almost look shimmery, like the predator when the predator wants to hide, and that's what it looked like. It was almost like if you looked at it dead on, you couldn't see it, but if you shifted your gaze a little bit, your peripheral vision would pick it up more. And but we saw it like bound out of the wood line, but it still looked like it still looked like it was like masking its surroundings. I had never seen anything like that before. Oh yeah, that was it. That was the moment where I was like, okay, I'm in. I wasn't in, but now I'm in. you know?
And it does draw you in, right? It kind of attaches to you in a way, like when you do have other paranormal experiences, you want to find out more about it and do the
Yeah.
research on it and try to have that experience again.
Yeah. And
Squatching does the same thing. When you have that experience, it kind of tags you and you're kind of hooked on it, right? So
yeah, yeah. And I and again, it was I'm so glad I did because then I was able to portray them correctly in my book. Right? They are the Pete. So I guess I just thought of this just now. It's the first time I thought of this. I would say that the Sasquatches are the peacekeepers in my novel. They're the peacekeepers of a house that is going off the rails with ghosts, and the Sasquatch come in to be the peacekeepers. And I wanted to make sure I portrayed them correctly. Um, and yeah, it was that was something.
interesting. I was going to say too, as you're talking about the side of your eye phenomena, that's often happens in the paranormal field as well when you catch things moving at the corner of your eye, or you'll see
Mhm.
something move like a spirit, like apparition form or something. It's usually at the corner of your eye, and
Yeah.
it's interesting you had that same thing with them too.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yeah,
So
and I felt nothing but like peace and curiosity, and I think you know I'm projecting, but I would like to think that they feel who is there on good intentions. I think there is a level of respect, and I think they knew me and Trevor were standing up there at the wood line. We had put our phones away. We were there for the right reasons. We weren't there to exploit or in the few times that I went to Fort Duffield to write the book, um, and I was completely alone in the field, out in the woods, and I would talk out loud. Um, just I would talk out loud to the woods, and who knows? Maybe they were hearing me, maybe they weren't. I don't know, but I would say like, "Hey, I'm back, working on my book again," and I would say, "Thank you so much for letting us see you for those few minutes that last night," or "I really appreciate you let." And then some things that I would do is I'd say, "I really appreciate you letting me stay in your woods to write this book. Thank you." And I basically it says I wanted to show respect. I don't even know if they heard me. They may not have heard me. Like the squirrel in the tree is probably the only thing that heard me. I don't know, but I wanted to at least like verbalize and say thank you for letting me sit here to write this book. Thank you for letting me be in your woods. I wanted if they were hearing me, I wanted them to know that I respected and I understood that that's their land, not mine, and I'm just coming in as a visitor, and that was important to me because I did that at MSP when I wrote These Walls Still Talk. Every single day that I walked onto that property and entered one of the buildings, I said, "Hey guys, I'm back again. Hope you had a good day. Just letting you know, I'm gonna sit over there. I'm gonna write. You know, tell you a story. If you want me gone, just let me know." Like I always want to say, I always want to project that like I'm visiting their space, and that I respect their space.
actually, that's a great segue to jump into your research at the other location for your other book, which is the Missouri State Pen. I know it is
Mhm.
an incredibly haunted and historical location, and
Yeah.
kind of talk a little bit about how you got in there and what kind of drew you to write a book about you staying there for so long?
Yeah, so I was, like I said, I have a 9 to 5 regular job, not just authoring. I have an actual, an actual job, and I had to go there for training. And it was one weekend, and one of the guys that was there for training was like, "Hey, Missouri State Penitentiary is having an overnight ghost hunt," and I went, and I was so blown away, not only by the place but by the staff. The staff there is just so cool and so welcoming and funny, and then I started to think, like, wouldn't it be great? Like, this would be a cool book, like doing an overnight ghost hunt at the Missouri State Penitentiary where the ghosts decide they've had enough and they want, you know what I mean? Like they want to take their place back. And I reached out to Sheila. Sheila is in charge of the Missouri State Penitentiary. She's in charge of all the tours and the ghost hunts. I reached out to her because I just want to make sure that I wasn't gonna get like a cease and desist order, or I wasn't gonna get sued, because I wanted my book to take place there. And if she said no, you can't do that, then I would have made a fictitious prison. I would have come up with, I would have created a penitentiary that doesn't really exist, because my book was still going to happen. Not only did she reply and say yes, she replied and said, "Well, how would you like to stay here to write the book?" And that opened up just a whole nother thing. So I had gone home after my training was done, and then I went back to Missouri State Penitentiary, and I spent 8 weeks there, and I wrote the book. And it is, Missouri State Penitentiary is 47 acres big, and and I had the freedom to go into and to write in any of the buildings that were still open to the public. Any of the condemned buildings, I wasn't allowed to go in, only for safety reasons. So Sheila still had to abide by the state of Missouri's rules. So I didn't get free reign. I was only allowed to go in the buildings that Missouri had said is safe for humans to be in. Which is still enough buildings for me to bounce around through my time there. But I did. I spent 8 weeks inside one of America's most haunted prisons, and alone in the dark at night. And it is really, really weird when you're writing and you're typing. It's 2 a.m. You 100% unequivocally know you're the only person in that building. And a jail cell door slams above you. Gong! And then it echoes. Gong, 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 gong. And I look up and I'm like, nope. And I close my laptop and I leave. Right? So Missouri State Penitentiary is full of sounds, residual sounds of people walking, cell doors slamming, that like chatter. They're known for, Missouri State Penitentiary is known for the peakers, and that is so many cells. You could be standing, so in A Hall, Housing Unit 4 is this wide open complex, and it's 4 walks. And so it's all cells, cell after cell after cell after cell, cell after cell after cell, right? We keep going up. Missouri State Penitentiary is so known for the peakers, which are shadow figures that will come out of the cell, look over the railing at you, and then dip back into the cell, that they've branded like shirts and hats and everything that says, "Don't fear the peakers, look out for the peakers." And like when you go to Missouri State Penitentiary, that's the number one thing people say they see the most, the peakers. You'll be in the middle of a tour, and someone will just break and go, "I see one, and they'll point, and sure enough, there's this shadow figure who then is like kind of like runs backwards back into a cell, And there, I saw the peakers. The peakers became my friends, and when I came into MSP every night to write, it was the peakers that I was talking to when I would speak aloud. Those are the ones I was speaking to. I was like, "Hey guys, I'm here, I'm back. Got to work on chapter 4 tonight. Hope you guys had a good day." And it was the peakers I was talking to, because they were the ones who would come out. It became, the peakers are so well known and so common that you start to just shrug them off after a while. And that's wild. Like the MSP is so full of energy. It's its own monster, where the Ditto House kind of has the Sasquatch, surrounding it, and it has its own paranormal stuff happening inside. The paranormal stuff happening inside the Ditto House are from everyday people. So, like, there's a woman who died in childbirth who kind of haunts the place. There was somebody who died because he was accused of cheating at a card game. The Ditto House kind of has like everyday people, but Missouri State Penitentiary has like its criminal. It has its inmates. Like the inmates are still there, like serving their sentence almost. Which makes it just really creepy. you know. So
I could just imagine you sitting there typing away or however you're writing your chapters out, and then, like you said, you hear that door slam and it just echoes through the whole place. You're like,
yeah,
okay, I'm moving to the other building. Bye.
yeah, I'm done. Yeah, I'm done. I'm moving. So I kept a diary of everything paranormal slash unexplainable that happened to me while I was at MSP. And my diary is included in the back of the book, unedited, unaltered. Every time something weird happened to me, I stopped writing and I would write in my diary. So when you finish the book, then you get my diary. When I went to the Ditto House to write the second book, the second on location book, I kept a diary only because I kept a diary on the MSP book. And once again, at the end of the Ditto House book, you'll get my diary. So you get all those stories about me out in the woods with Sasquatch. You get all the stories of me coming face to face with my first full apparition, where I scream, she screamed, we all scream for ice cream. So the diary is kind of cool because once the book itself ends, you flip the page and then you read what happened to me while I was there. And some of it correlates with the book. It's almost like they know I was there writing, and they did things that made sense to the book, which again itself is very, very creepy.
Well, it sounds like your books are connected in a way too. So since you have the diaries at the end of both of them, they could get your personal
Yeah,
experiences in
there's
both
a,
locations. So
yeah, there's a term called interconnected standalones. So interconnected standalones means they're kind of like Nancy Drew, Hardy Boys, Goosebumps, where you Scooby Doo. Think of them as Scooby Doo episodes, right? So you don't need to read These Walls Still Talk first. You can read either of these books. It doesn't matter the order because they are not connected at all, but they're the same kind of me staying inside of a haunted location and then putting a diary at the end, right? So they are not a part one and part two, but they are the interconnected standalones. Yeah.
yeah, that's what I was going to say. They're connected, but they're kind of similar too. So
Yep. Yep.
do you plan on maybe continuing this type of writing where you go into locations and make up another novel about
Yeah.
that location and share your experiences at a different location?
I've been an author for almost 20 years, and I did not expect my career to take this turn. So I wrestle with this not defining me as an author. Like, I want to still be the author who writes everything. So I am taking a break right now. I have, I'd say I have the next 3 novels already outlined in my head, just so I can break away from it. I just don't want to be pigeonholed into this. However, I do have an offer on the table from the owner of a closed down insane asylum in Iowa, who said he will let me stay there for 30 days if I wish to do a third book in this world. If I'm to do that, it's the Melbourne Manor. It is terrifying. I flew out to Iowa and I stayed there for a weekend. And I had some experiences there that will last for the rest of my life. I had stuff happen to me there that I had never experienced before. That place is crazy scary. So To answer your question, I feel that yes, if I'm to do this, it won't be for like maybe 2 years because I want to get these other 3 books out because I want to break kind of this pattern I've created because my readers, I feel that my readers have come to know me as somebody who puts out something new each time, and I don't want to put out this over and over and over, and then my readers say, "Well, this is what he's doing now." No, this isn't what I'm doing now. Um, but the Melbourne Manor might be the last one. I think I might take him up on it. I've already kind of worked out the plot in my head, and again, it will be completely different than the other two because I don't ever want these books to be the same old, same old. But I think after that, I'll hang it up. I don't think that I think that. But Melbourne Manor was I when I went out there for that weekend, it was the first time I heard a woman, an apparition, screaming help in the hallway. And we were like screaming from the end of a hallway, help, help, help. And we were the only ones in. And I was like I couldn't, like, I wanted to call, like, cry and call my mom. Like, I was so terrified. Like, that place is crazy active. So I think the Melbourne Mariner could possibly be the last one I do. But I have some books I want to do first, right? I'm super excited. I have a dark fantasy, neo noir gothic novel that I'm gonna start working on soon. It's kind of like a Dark City meets Silence of the Lambs. If you remember the movie Dark City, the Alex Proyas movie with Kiefer Sutherland, but like it's a very gothic-y, dark fantasy novel with gargoyles and stuff. Like I want to do that. Like I want to not. I want to kind of break away a bit for a few books, and then go to the Melbourne Manor. Like then I can revisit this thing again.
Also, it takes a toll on you mentally too, right? If you're staying in these locations, like at the prison for
Yeah.
that long,
Well,
that's got to play on your mental a little bit too, right?
so not only that, but it depletes my leave bank at work. Right? So because I only get so much leave at work and I have to use it to go write these books at weeks at a time. So yes, I can't keep burning my leave at work, but there is an emotional aspect to it because it is draining and it's scary and I'm on high alert but it's fun. Like that's not me complaining. Like that's me saying that this is fun.
Well, I wish you the best of luck, especially taking your break and doing the ones that you want to get done first, and hopefully get back into maybe this theme again as your final
Thank
book
you.
with it. But thank you so much, Brian, for coming on and talking to us a little bit about your background, how you got into writing, your childhood experiences at the funeral home that you lived in. That's just creepy. So thank you so much for telling us those stories. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on.
How can people get a hold of you, or how can they find your books?
Sure, I love that question. So all of my books, all 14 novels are available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook. I say that because so many people nowadays love audiobooks, whether you're commuting, doing housework, working out, whatever. But yes, and my books are wide in every bookstore in the US, Canada, Australia, the UK, and then a few bookstores in Italy and Germany and Russia, which is kind of weird. That I don't know why that happened, but yes, if you are living in any of those territories, I should be in all of those bookstores. If I'm also obviously on Amazon across the board, but my website, brianpaone.com, it's literally myname.com. If you order any paperback off that, then I sign it. And they're not pre-signed boxes that go out. I actually take it and sign it the day you order it and personalize it. So, but yes, I know you are in Canada and I am in America, but my distributor distributes to Canada, so I should be everywhere. But ebook, paperback, and audio, so I cover all 3 bases.
Oh, great. We'll put your website for sure in the show notes on this episode so people can find you that way. But thank you, Brian, for joining us. I really appreciate it, and it was so wonderful to hear some interesting paranormal stories on the show. Thank you for coming on the show.
Absolutely.
Miss one of our episodes? Replay our episodes on Rhode Island Broadcasting. Show your support for Haunting Live by supporting our broadcast partner, Rhode Island Broadcasting. Find them on YouTube.